Hi everyone. I know it's been a really long time since I made a video, and I think for those of you who follow like the blog and the Polyglots of the Week stuff, you realize that I said my next video would actually be pictures from Armenia. And here I am, more than 2 months out from my trip to Armenia, and my photos have still not been edited. So, been edited. So yeah, maybe I'll do that this weekend. We'll see. But anyways, for those of you who are blatantly unaware of my life, whether you don't follow my blog or the Polyglots of the Week channel or my other social media that I've connected to all of this, I just moved to Los Angeles 2 weeks ago, and I'm doing my PhD at UCLA. I finally have like all my books everywhere, and it's very nice. So I'm going to show you all my library a little bit. I was thinking about showing you my apartment, but I need to clean a little bit, and it's really not all that fancy. I'm just more actually a little bit obsessed with the fact that all of my books are actually on shelves, except for I do have one box of English literature that I left in the States that I'll mention later. People on the internet have been asking like, how many books do you have?
How many books do you have?
I don't think it's incredibly huge, but I've also been in like much larger libraries that, you know, take up houses or like rooms in people's houses. And so the fact that I have one, this is a large bookshelf, like 5 shelves. It's a bit taller than me, so it's probably about a 6 foot tall bookshelf. And then I have 2, that's probably like 3.5 foot tall bookshelves. That's the thing, is I don't find it to be a lot, but I guess for some people it is. I think it just tends to be more diverse than most people's libraries. You know, everything from Japanese and Swedish to Chechen and Kabardian to, you know, Arabic and Persian and Pashto. So in that sense. So again, I don't want to make this video super long, but I did go sort of shelf by shelf and kind of explain these are the books I have, not one by one, so you know every single book, but kind of these are my books, these are how I arrange them, because there is some logic to it, although it doesn't make sense to everyone. But yes, so this is my library. Generally the way I organize all of these is I start with language first, and then sort of go from culture after that. I'm not going to zoom into every single title, but generally you'll see here that from left to right it's Arabic language and things. And then as we get here around the middle, the very first one you'll see is this white one here that's in the middle, which is Ra'ayt Ramallah, and this is the startup by Arabic literature for the most part. There's a couple random things in there, but otherwise it's mostly literature. And then we go from literature into sort of Arab Middle Eastern studies. I have things on IE conflict, and which is mostly my Arab Middle Eastern studies, and then general things like Islamic studies, and art and history, and then we'll get into some philosophy as we transition into the next shelf. So as we come now into the second shelf, you'll see here on the left we sell some things on Orientalism and general Middle Eastern studies. We go from medieval Islamic philosophy into Orientalism, and then we go into Persian. Generally this is the start of the Iranian stuff. I just started with Persian because that's generally the most common Iranian language, and I think probably even despite my lack of focus on purely just Persian, it is what I have the most of. I start with general Persian things, and then I focus obviously on Iranian dialect, and then I transition into Tajik and Dari. And then around here in the middle, the big blue book that you see is Ash'ari Urudaki in Tajik, and then we hit literature, and then history with the Richard Fry series of Heritage of Persia, Gold Age of Persia, and Heritage of Central Asia. And then starting with these over here on the right, with the black binding that you'll see here, we start on Pashto books, which the majority of my Pashto resources are actually mostly digital, but I do have a few hard copy books. And then we get into Afghan history, Afghanistan Ink, the Kite Runner, and on the next shelf we'll see the rest of the Khalid Hosseini books. Actually, I almost forgot about the middle shelf here. My old place these just sat on top of a bookshelf, but I had this extra shelf and I wasn't really sure what to do with it, so I made this small shelf here. I consider this like my shelf of holy books. It's translations of the Petit Prince in multiple languages. Most of them have been bought in country, not all of them. I now have 2 copies in Armenian, Arabic, Persian, French, English. I lost my Spanish one. I lent it to somebody, I don't know who, and I don't have it anymore. And German, which was bought for me in Germany, and then I have a Brazilian Portuguese one, but it was bought in Peru. In the center is a stack of different translations of the Bible, French, Greek New Testament, an Arabic translation of the Gospel of John, Pennsylvania Dutch from years ago, and the bottom green one is actually Wolof. And then on the right, I have a translation of the Quran, and I have the Khor de Avesta, which is not technically a holy book, it's more a book of prayers, but it's still sitting there in the original Avesta. I apologize if things have started to get shaky now. My tripod is not working well with me, so now I just have to hold the camera. So down here we see the rest of the Khaled Hosseini books on the left, and then we flip into a session and some stuff, and then I take the transition from a session around here in the middle to start transitioning into Old Iranian languages or older Iranian languages, Middle Persian there in the spiral, then Young Avestan and Old Persian, and then we go from there to Sanskrit, which transitions into modern Indic with Urdu, Hindi. The Kiswahili book was just sort of random. I didn't know where to put it, but it got put there. And then we transition into Turkics, which is the only thing hard copies I have is my Turkmen book and one of my Turkish books. And then I have Aramaic and Syriac and Ancient Greek, and then a random modern Greek book. And the little black thing is it's Pimsleur Hebrew. I know it's Hebrew. I don't know if it's Pimsleur or not. And so this is mostly pretty much all of my Middle Eastern stuff. The bottom shelf is just where dictionaries go. They're the heaviest thing. And so I just sort of keep them all here. We have, from left to right, we have Persian, Arabic, Classical Armenian, Turkish. The first Turkish might be an older Turkish or an Ottoman Turkish. It's the Red House, but that might still be modern Turkish. It's just an old dictionary. And then Turkish again. Latin, Spanish, Swedish, French, German, Arabic, Tajik, Dari, Swedish, Hungarian, and then sitting on top there, the little red one, is a Georgian dictionary. From the big bookshelf, we're going to transition into the small bookshelf. I have 2 small bookshelves. This is the first one. This one sits in my bedroom. So these again are, these aren't Middle Eastern things that I use all the time, but these are probably more useful in my day-to-day life, except for maybe some of the bottom shelf stuff, rather than the one that's in the living room. The first shelf here is dedicated not entirely to Armenian. The first half on the left is Armenian, up until we get to the Georgia book in the middle. Armenia obviously isn't in the Middle East, but it is more related as far as like my studies go. But I just wanted to be able to fit it all in one space, and on the other bookshelf it would have been split. I would have split all the other Middle Eastern languages. So I put it here, and I worked it as Armenian transitioning into Georgian and Kabardian and Chechen, so more Caucasian languages transitioning into Russian on the rest of the shelf, starting there with my Russian textbook. Everything to the right of it is Russian. And sort of the whole, okay, here are languages of the Caucasus transitioning into the empire that dominated the Caucasus. The middle shelf more or less goes out to Germanic languages plus linguistics. I didn't really plan it. I knew German was the next one I wanted to do, and then I wanted the linguistics there, and so I was like, well, what will fill up here? And Swedish happened to fit. I don't have any other hard copies of other Germanics, so I can say this is all my Germanics, and then linguistics after that. German, Swedish, and then a lot of just language theory, historical stuff, sociolinguistics, dialectology, a little bit of Chomsky, Indo-European, etc., etc. The bottom shelf sort of just ends up being the rounding out of other things. Spanish and French are in the living room just because I don't really use them as much anymore, and I have so much of each that they sort of deserve their own shelf almost. So the other random languages just sort of got tossed here. Chinese does have a function here. Chinese is useful for my research later on down the road. So it's there. A random Japanese book, random Tagalog book, Hungarian, which could also be useful. Some Italian, Esperanto, Yiddish, Latin, and then a couple random things like the meaning of Tingo, which is cute, and some things on graduate study and writing. So this is sort of my everything else fell here shelf, as far as things that are still useful for me, and not things that just need to sit on the shelf somewhere. So this is actually the final shelf with books on it. There's one more small shelf with foreign films. Well, it's DVDs and CDs, mostly foreign films. I'm not going to show you that one. It's just not important. This is where the Spanish and the French sort of quote unquote went to die, and then some random things at the top. So I'll start actually from the bottom up here. So the bottom shelf went to Spanish. I don't think I really picked which shelf went where. Just they went on the bottom, and the top shelf was sort of random things. There's actually a little bit of French here on the left because the French overflowed. I think that's why it went that way, because I wanted to overflow and not be like, why is French on the bottom with a couple random things above it? So it's mostly Spanish, and then actually on the right there you see the textbook and workbook for Bem-vindo, which is a Brazilian Portuguese book. And then, yeah, left of the Spanish 4 years is still French literature, and then a book on Henri Daumier, which is a French artist. But otherwise, this is everything from Spanish vocabulary, Spanish idioms, some text things, but then also like Don Quixote de la Mancha, Tuareg, Israel Allende, the books from my AP Spanish Lit course. A lot of literature is here as well. I can't seem to get the lighting to get right on this one. I tried it a couple times. But this is the French shelf. Again, on the left you see Promenade, Allez Viens, a French translation book, French verbs, À vous d'écrire, other French sort of pedagogical texts. And then right there after the Mastering French Vocabulary, you have like Dirty French, a couple copies of that, French verbs, and then really the rest is just literature, everything from Beckett to Baudelaire to Candide, Voltaire. What else do I mean, really, it's just, it's quite the spectrum there. Obviously, there's the classical things that I've had to read, but then it's, Kif Kif Demain and sort of North African French literature and a couple things like that. But again, yeah, I have a lot of French lit from undergrad, some of it being things that I actually studied. I did study, Maupassant, Flaubert, Marguerite Duras, and a little bit of Beckett, I think. I studied Candide actually in high school on my own, but Jacques Prévert, that was in undergrad. But then some of these are also like, the Alliance Française would have like an essay writing competition, and then they would just sort of give out free literature, and some books have just been given to me over the years. So some of these actually I haven't read. I probably should. And then my top shelf is actually more English stuff. I actually do have another box of like English language literature. I didn't bring it with me because I wasn't sure about space, and it's really just a few things I'd like to keep over time. So really the only English language literature I have here is I have a copy of Taming of the Shrew, I have War Day, which I still haven't finished but is interesting, I have The Fountainhead, a complete works of William Shakespeare, and I have Troilus and Cressida, which I'm not the hugest Chaucer fan, but it was a graduation present, and I do need to read it at some point. And then on the left, just some sort of random books that are in English but are still interesting enough for me that I wanted to have them with me and not, leave them back on the East Coast. So I have like a Gaza cookbook, Psychology of Gender, Philosophy, a European history book, a canon of classical music, a book on herbal medicine, sushi, practicing Buddhism, sort of things that were important to me that I did want to bring with me. So yeah, those are pretty much the books.